Okay, let us get started with this week's shiur number 5. Shiur number 5 in Tzurba Rabbanan, as we continue in volume number 16 of Tzurba Rabbanan, the Lax Family Edition of the set and the Weiss Family volume number 16. As we discard Hilchot Shabbos, we are up to the 5th, into our second month of Hilchot Shabbos, and we have started Shabbos. We spoke about Tosefah Shabbos, and now we are up to Mincha on Erev Shabbos and the Tefilot of Shabbos. This is an area that not even people who learn Hilchot Shabbos don't focus on these simanim in Shulchan Aruch and the Gemaras that talk about this. These are very important issues that come up Lamaisa every single week. We are going to talk about the davenings, the Tefilot of Shabbos, starting with Mincha on Erev Shabbos, Kabbalah Shabbos. Where did that come from? When did it start? And what are the sources? Ma'ariv, the uniquenesses and the differences of Ma'ariv Friday night and Ma'ariv during the week, the changes that we make, the Vayachulu that we say at the end of the Tefillah, the Maggid Avos Tefillah that we say, which kind of sounds like a Chazaras Hashatz, and the morning, the Shachris Tefillah a little bit as well. Then the next year we'll get to will be issues of Musaf and other related issues regarding Tefillah, Musaf and Mincha and Ma'ariv and any mistakes and Tashlumin, all different ideas related to that. But two full shiurim, shiur number 5 and B'ez Hashem next time number 6, all about the halachos of Tefillah of Shabbos. Again, Shabbos is a day of unique spirituality. We know the Gemara tells us in Maseches Beitza, this is just by way of introduction, that we get a neshama yesera on Shabbos, and that's why we know that we have the bisamim at the end of Shabbos, because our neshama yesera feels bad and we lost it, so we want to make ourselves feel good. But neshama yesera, what does neshama yesera mean? What does it mean that an extra neshama? So Rashi quotes in Beitza Tezayin, the food tastes better on Shabbos. You eat and you don't get sick. Vei nafsho katse love. But, says the Shida Bukubetzes, there in Beitza on Daf Tezayin, Neshama Yesera, Pirish, V'alzech chal alav shefa eloki. There is a spiritual, divine spirit. V'seichel yoser, la'asok batorah, ula'ayin b'maaseh Hashem. There's more spirituality in the world. And when there's more spirituality, Jews daven more. When there's a lot of spirituality, we daven a lot. And that's what Shabbos is about. We daven a lot. Not a lot, just more than usual. As we'll see, Chazal were also focused on the balance, that we shouldn't be focusing only on spirituality. We know the Gemara tells us in Maseches Pesachim that there is a concept on Yontif called Chatzil Hashem v'Chatzil Lachem. Some of the day is supposed to be for Hashem, and some of the day is for spiritual pursuits, and some of the day for physical pursuits. But there are 3 exceptions to the rule. One of them is Shabbos. The Karasa l'Shabbos Oneg. Oneg requires physical enjoyment, and that is for sure. And that is not something that Chazal took lightly, getting rid of, and that's why we have a shorter Shemona Esrei. We'll talk about that by Hashem next time. But anyway, let's get into the Tefillos of Shabbos, and starting with Mincha. So the Torah tells us now in source number 1, we're on page 193 in the Tzurba booklet. Those following along, page 193, source number 1. Says the Torah in Siman Reis Samach Zayin, Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim, he's the one that really gets the credit, by the way, for organizing all of halacha. We usually call it the Dalet Chalkei Shulchan Aruch, the 4 Chalachim of the Shulchan Aruch, but really the Torah is the one that did it. The Torah, he's called the Torah because the Arba Turim, the 4 pillars, so he was the one that made the categorization of Orach Chaim, Yeridea, Even Ezer, and Choshen Mishpat. The Shulchan Aruch followed him, the Beis Yosef followed him, and used his structuring and chapters. Says the Torah, V'nechnas l'beis haknesos on Erev Shabbos, we go into shul, v'umis palin tfilas mincha, and we daven mincha, kamo b'shar yemos achol. Mincha is the same, except for ela she'ein noflin al peneihem. There's no what we call tachnun. There's no nefilas apayim. Nefilas apayim associated with pain and tsar and sadness. So we know anytime you don't say anytime is a simcha day, you don't say tachnun. So already on Erev Shabbos, you don't say tachnun. Why? What's Erev Shabbos? It's not Shabbos yet. So there seems to be some type of aura, even in a halachic sense, of Shabbos already. Some type of aura. Not just the Lavush says in source number 3, that it's late and you're running out of time and you're getting close to Shabbos. Okay, but we paskin that even if it's early, right? If you look in the next source, the Mishnah Berurah quotes, even if it's the Pri Megadim, v'nira duha dimishpalim mincha gedola. Even if one is davening mincha gedola, you have many hours till Shabbos. You're davening the early mincha. Still, ein nofel on we don't say tachnun. Why? Because already after Chatzos on Erev Shabbos, there is a type of aura in the air. The Mishnah Berurah also quotes if somebody is eating a meal after Chatzos on Erev Shabbos, you don't say Al Naros Bavel, which is what is said on a weekday to remember the Beis Hamikdash, but we say Shir Amalos on Erev Shabbos as well. Again, one shouldn't daven very late, we'll get to, but the whole Erev Shabbos. This is even reflected in a halacha of Hilchos Avelos. The Gemara tells us back in source number 2, the Gemara in Moed Katan on Daf Chav Zayin. The Gemara tells us, Tana Rabbanan, Me'emasai Zokven Asamitos. In the days of old, the minhag that we don't have today, there was a certain type of beds. They had beds that were collapsible. And nihug, a custom of Avelos, is that they collapse the beds. They collapse the beds. We don't have those kind of beds anymore. We don't do this. But this is what they used to do. So on Erev Shabbos, we know there's no Avelos in public on Shabbos. There is private Avelos, but there's no public Avelos. So the Gemara says, when do you undo? When do you pick up the beds? Me'emasai zokven asamitos be'erev Shabbos, mena mincha v'lamala. Already by mincha time. Because already then there is an aura of Shabbos. There's an aura of Shabbos, and that halacha reflects this idea. There is just, this is not a topic now, it's not so much Hilchos Shabbos, but it's Hilchos Avelos, but it's an important chiddush by Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik says it's printed in the shiur harav of the Rav Soloveitchik on Hilchos Avelos that the Gemara, if you look at the next line of the Gemara, that it's not in your packet, there's an extra line. It says, when do you pick up the beds? But the Gemara then says, but an Avel cannot sit on those beds until Shabbos. So you lift up the beds already from Mincha time, but the Avel can't sit on the beds till later. What's that distinction? Rav Soloveitchik also said, the Gemara tells us that if there are beds in the house, not only does the Avel's bed have to be undone and collapse, all the beds in the house are collapsed. All the beds in the house, what does that have to do with the Avel? Says Rav Soloveitchik, there are two concepts. There's something called nihuge avelus, customs and activities that the Avel has to be involved in, but also there's something called a base Avel, the halachic status of the house of an Avel. Moving all the beds and collapsing all the beds, that's not a din in the Avel. Avel sitting on the bed, and Avel has to be noag avelus all the way till Shabbos. That's why he can't sit on the bed. But a base Avel, that already changes already at Chatzos based on this aura of Shabbos, based on mincha time, I should say, and therefore it's all the beds in the house, and you pick it up. Rav Soloveitchik said he thought there are two other halachas that he thinks are a din of base Avel, which is not so much the minhag olam, right? Learning Torah. Rav Soloveitchik thought that learning Torah in a base Avel is not just a din of nihuge avelus. It's a din of base Avel. Rav Soloveitchik was against the minhag olam. And I'm not here to change the minhag olam. The minhag olam is to learn Mishnayos in a base Avel between Mincha and Ma'ariv in a Shiva house. Rav Soloveitchik said, no, it's a din of base Avel. Not just that an Avel can't learn himself, but Torah can't be learned in a house of a base Avel. That's Rav Soloveitchik. And also She'ela Shalom. Saying hello to people. Sometimes we see somebody at a Shiva call that we haven't seen in a very long time. And it's a little uncomfortable. You kind of look at each other. You don't want to give each other a hug, but kind of look and give the nod. And then as you're going out, maybe you'll give a hug. You say Shalom Aleichem, when you're around the corner on the other side of the hall. Rav Soloveitchik said, there really shouldn't be She'ela Shalom in a base Avel. Aruch HaShulchan also quotes that. He doesn't say the whole lumdus of Rav Soloveitchik, but that's Rav Soloveitchik, and there are other ayahs in terms of base Avel, but that's the continuation of this Gemara in Moed Katan on Daf Chav Zayin that talks about the halacha of the beds. So, but we see from here that this is what is meant by the aura of Shabbos as it is explained. The Mishnah Berurah says that in the name of the Pri Megadim that Chatzos, even after Chatzos, one doesn't say Tachnun. The Shmir Shabbos does point out, relating to our last year, that one should try to daven mincha at a certain time when one can be makabel Shabbos in a proper way. Mispalel Tfilas Mincha B'Tzibur says the Shmir Shabbos is source number 5. Yishtadel sheyispalel ba'od moed. Tainu she'efshar yeh lakabel Shabbos l'fachos manua l'fnei Shkia in order to be able to be makabel Shabbos properly. The Isha Yisrael ends off by saying, as we said, what happens if one walks into shul? Sometimes it's happened. One walks in late to shul, and the tziburs are already doing Kabbalah Shabbos. So if the shul already was makabel Shabbos, it's not so right to daven mincha in the middle of that tzibur. Right? If they're ready, mamash makabel Shabbos. If it's after Ma'ariv, for sure, you shouldn't be davening mincha, davening outside. If they're Yedin Nefesh, the beginning of Kabbalah Shabbos, okay, they were Kabbalah Shabbos, yet people aren't thinking that it's Kabbalah Shabbos. So the Isha Yisrael says in Madain Lo Kibbal Av Shabbos. We spoke last week about being mishubid and being pulled after the rest of the tzibur, which we said as long as there are other minyanim, and maybe it doesn't even apply nowadays, where Moshe Feinstein said, depending on what your kavanah is. But the Isha Yisrael says you could do it outside, you could daven if they've already been makabel and then come in if one is running late. Okay, this is about mincha on Shabbos. So now we get into the next stage, Kabbalah Shabbos. Kabbalah Shabbos is not one of the tefillos of Shabbos. We know we have mincha going into Shabbos, then we have 4 tefillos on Shabbos: Ma'ariv, Shachris, Musaf, Mincha. That's what we have. But there's a minhag that we do of Kabbalah Shabbos. Kabbalah Shabbos is based already on the Gemara. Based on the Gemara, the structure that we have for Kabbalah Shabbos really is from 500 years ago, in the days of the 450 years ago, in the days of the Kabbalists in Tzfat and the Arizal. But it goes back, the idea of being Makabel Shabbos and saying certain tefillos and accepting Shabbos, that already comes from the Gemara. Gemara Shabbos Kuf Yotes, source number 7. Rabbi Chanina miyati fekoya panya demali shabsa. Rabbi Chanina used to get dressed and garb himself. Amar used to tell his Talmidim, Bov and Neitzei, Likra Shabbos Hamalka. Let's go out and greet the Shabbos queen. Rabbi Yani Lavish Mani B'Mali Shabbos. Rabbi, he used to wear special garments. V'yomer Bowi Kala. That's what Rabbi Yani used to do. So we already see the Gemara, the Amoraim going out to greet the Shabbos Malka. But as we know, we have the special tefillos. We say special program of Tehillim, and the climax coming into the song of L'Chadodi, written by Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, one of the great Kabbalists of the time. Shlomo Alkabetz wrote that tefillah. As we know, the Rashi Tevis, Shamar V'Zachar, Likra Shabbos, is Shlomo. His name, and we say the program of Tehillim, Tzadi Hey, Tzadi Vav, a couple of others. The last tefillah the last parak we say is Mizmar LeDavid. Why do we say that tefillah? So that the Gemara says in Brachas Daf Chavtes, when the Gemara is searching for a remez to each of the tefillos that we say a 7 bracha Shmona Esrei, so to speak, a 7 bracha Amida on Shabbos. How do you know that? What's the remez for 7? What's the remez for 9 on Rosh Hashanah? What's the remez for 18 or 19 on a weekday, which we'll get to in a second? So the Gemara finds a mucker for each of these. So the mucker, the source for the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos is Mizmar LeDavid Havel Hashem Elim. That's the Gemara Brachas Chavtes in source number 9. Hani Sheva Shabbos Keneged Mi, Amar Reb Chalafta ben Shmuel Keneged Shiva Kolos, Shamar David Alamayim. The 4 times this is the word Kol. Kol Hashem, Ashpakoa, Kol Hashem Bahadar. So those 7 words are a remez to the Shmona Esrei, the Amida. Again, we call it Shmona Esrei. That's the colloquial, but the Amida that we say on Shabbos. That's also, by the way, I once heard why we stand by that tefillah. Why do we stand by that tefillah? Because the Gemara also says one of the sources for the 18 bracha Amida is it has Shem Hashem 18 times in that Mizmar. So it's a remez to the Amida that we stand for. So that's Mizmar LeDavid. We stand for that parak. It's interesting why Rav Soloveitchik deals with this in his shiur on brachas. Why we need remazin. This is one example of a remez. Why do we need a remez to the 7 and the 18 and the 19 and the 9? Why can't we just daven? Chazal had to come up with a remez in the psukim to every Shmona Esrei. So this is a theme that Rav Soloveitchik spoke about many times. Again, I never heard Rav Soloveitchik. He was already ill when I came to the YU campus. But all the shiurim, that it's clear that he spoke about this many times, and that is the concept of matir, the concept of a halachic allowance. Rav Soloveitchik said, who are we to be able to approach Hashem? Who are we to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that way, through prayer, through He's infinite, and who are we? So Chazal always needed a matir. Needed a matir to allow us to approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So finding hints in the psukim, that's part of the matir. That's part of what allows us to approach Hashem David. It's in Tanakh, which was given by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the Nevi'im. So if he told us, and he was Maramis that, so that is why it is allowed, and that's one of the messages that we have. Why? And so we continue. So those are the tefillos that we say, getting ready, L'Chadodi, which is built on Chazal, has a lot to do with Yerushalayim, right? The Gula HaSida, relating to Shabbos as well. Then we say Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos, right? The Lavush says, because that is a lot about Hoda'ah, a lot of thankfulness. The Lavush says in Arachayim, in Reish Pei Aleph, in source number 10, so we say that we talk about the thankfulness, and on Shabbos we have time to be able to focus on all the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. We're able to stop and focus and think. So that's why we give Hodah to Hashem, and that's why this Mizmar is recited. If you look at the content of the Mizmar, it doesn't really have to do with Shabbos. Right, the rest of the Mizmar, it's all about Sadik V'Ralo, Rasha V'Tovlo. So what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to take care of us? So what does that do with Shabbos? There's a beautiful thought that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky has in Parsha Shmos, where he discusses the Medrash. The Medrash says that Bnei Yisrael used to have scrolls. They had scrolls that they used to read. Melamed shahayu biyadam megillos, shayu mishtashin bahem mishabbos l'Shabbos. They used to read these scrolls every Shabbos, lomar, shakadosh baruch hu go'alan. And these scrolls spoke about how Hashem is going to redeem them. Maybe some of the scrolls spoke about the Yosef story, Pako Pakadati, the Bris Ben Abasarim, Lefisha Yinochin b'Shabbos, because they had rest on Shabbos, and they used to keep up their spirits. So that's at the end of the Shmos when Paro says, give him more work to do. Paro took away Shabbos. He says they're too positive. They're too looking forward. So they stopped reading those scrolls. Armel Paro, let him not focused. So says Rabbi Yaakov, what were these scrolls? They must have been scrolls that gave chizuk, that gave idud, that gave encouragement. Says the Rabbi Yaakov, one of these scrolls was Mizmar Shel Yom HaShabbos. It was the shiur that they used to say on Shabbos. Tov lo dos l'Hashem l'Zam l'Shem Elyon, Ishbar lo yedo, chazil lo yavan. That's what they said going through the difficulties in Mitzrayim. The nearest Mizmar Zeh, who echad me'amegillah shehishtashu bohen b'yom HaShabbos b'Mitzrayim. And after Paro was maskim to give them Shabbos originally, then took it away. And that's what these scrolls were. Lo odedes rucham v'shelo yikshu kushis yusal salik v'ralo. Moshe Rabbeinu was masaking to they study Mizmar Shel Yom HaShabbos, and that maybe they studied Sefer Eov. If that was around then, Rabbi Yaakov says, but these were some of the scrolls that existed. And that is another message that we can think about. When we say Mizmar Shel Yom HaShabbos, we can think that for thousands of years we have been saying this Mizmar on Shabbos, and it gave chizuk to the Jews in Mitzrayim. After Mincha, then again, we continue. As we mentioned, we say a number of the Mizmarim. We say 6 Mizmarim. Maybe some of them are connected to. We say 6 because the Isha Yisrael explains 6 plus 7, like Shabbos is the 7th, and we yearn for the Geula. Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba. But that's what we say. We say Mizmar Shel Yom HaShabbos and Hashem Malach. That follows. Right, following that is Kegavna, Kabbalistically after, or the Minhag, the Shulchan Aruch quotes in source number 12 to say Baba Malikin, the second parak of Mishnayos Shabbos. Noagim lower parak Baba Malikin. Why Dafka Baba Malikin? So obviously it's about Hadlakas Neir Shabbos, that those laws. But also one could look at it as we want to start Shabbos with learning. Right, we just had Shabbos, so Talmud Torah. How do you start every religious experience? Talmud Torah. So that's why Dafka every Shabbos we start with Talmud Torah. We learn the Mishnayos of Masechah Shabbos. So this is Adkan Mincha and Kabbalah Shabbos. And then we go to Ma'ariv. So now it's actually Baruch Hashem. We've made it to Shabbos. We've discussed Erev Shabbos laws. Remember that start on Wednesday and Thursday about Maflik and Besvina. We spoke about Tosefes. We spoke about Hadlakas Neris. We spoke about Mincha. We spoke about Kabbalah Shabbos. And now we get to Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, we get to Shabbos and we daven. And we have Baruch Hu. Ma'ariv looks the same until we get to the end of Hashkivenu. At the end of Hashkivenu, we know we have a different chasima. A different ending of the bracha. On a weekday we say Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad. Hashem guards us forever. And on Shabbos we have a longer and more multi-themed ending. The Tur says, now I'm on page 201, source 13. The Tur tells us, and we have a change gear. So why don't you say the Shmira line? Says the Tur, because Shabbos is Shomer. You don't need to talk about the Shmira. Shabbos ain't Tzrichen Shmira, Shabbos Shomer. The Shabbos guards the Jew. More than the Jew guards Shabbos, the Shabbos guards the Jew, as we have so many stories about the Shmira of Shabbos. The Tur then quotes V'noagin, there's a minhag to say V'shamru. V'shamru B'nei Yisrael as Shabbos, that is the minhag in many places to say V'shamru. Lomar, why V'shamru B'nei Yisrael? To remind us, She'im Yishmeru Shabbos, Ein Tzrichen Shmira. You don't need Shmira, as we just said. But then the Tur adds one line, V'hu Gam Kein Me'ein Geula. What's the Tur bothered by? We know in Maseches Brachos, the Gemara says that we have to have smichas geula l'tefila. We're not allowed to have a hefsek, a break between geula, Gal Yisrael, and tefila. And the Gemara says, so what about hashkivenu? The Gemara says geula arichta. Right, that is an extension of the Geula. What does that mean? Rabbeinu Yonah in Bracha says that this is what Chazal, the Bnei Yisrael said at the time of Makas Bachoros when they were huddled in their homes. Hashkivenu, Hashem guard us, Hashkivenu, Shalom Shalom, Meitin Makin L'chaim, Ufros Aleinu Sukkah Shalomecha. It was said at the time of Geula. So it's a Geula Arichta. That's Hashkivenu. Then the Gemara says, what about Hashem Svasai Tiftach? That's a Tefillah Arichta. That's an extension of the Shmona Esrei. So neither of those are Hefsekim. So we have Geula Arichta pulling the Geula Gal Yisrael, Tefillah Arichta pulling the Shmona Esrei. So that's it. Kaddish is a mitzari if it brings the whole tzibur together. We can't have any other hefsekim. So it says the Tur. What about V'shamru? Right, V'shamru B'nei Yisrael Shabbos, we're Makabel Shabbos, and then we say that together. Isn't that a hefsek? It's a violation of smichas geula tefillah. That's what the Tur says. No, V'shamru is me'ein geula, because if we would keep 2 Shabbosos, miyan nigalin. That is the line in Masechah Shabbos that the Tur quotes. Shem yishbu beis Shabbosos miyan nigalin. Beautiful. Not in the sources in front of you, but I'll add a couple of sources. The Shulchan Aruch does not quote this. The Torah quotes V'shamru. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say it, and the Gra says, you know why? Because I don't believe in this. I think it's a nice hashkafic message, but I don't think that that's good enough. And I think it's a hefsek, and that's why the minhag in many places in Yerushalayim and in certain yeshivas they don't say V'shamru because of this Gra. The Gra writes in Ma'aser Rav, the sefer of his minhagim, Hu atzmo lo hayom klal in Siman Samach Zayin. He would not say V'shamru kedei lismoch geula le'tefila. That's he wouldn't say it himself. But Tzibor, but interestingly, he acknowledged that it was the minhag of Klal Yisrael, even in the Ma'aser Rav. Avalat Tzibor she'at slova shatz hayu omrin. The Shul said it, but he just didn't say it himself. Interesting though, that's V'shamru. So the Tur explained V'shamru. What about we say it on Yontif too? Vaydaber Moshe Zmodei Hashem. We say Vaydaber. What does that have to do with it? So it says the Drisha on the bottom of the Tur. Well, that's all the Chagim are Zech L'Tzias Mitzrayim. They're all connected to the process. That's also Geula. It's also connected to Geula. So we just saved Vaydaber Moshe Zmodei Hashem, the minhag of those shuls that say that. What we got 2 left? What about Tikku B'Chodesh Shofar on Rosh Hashanah? The minhag of many shuls is to say that pasuk too. Says the Lavush, Tavkuf Pei Beis. We mentioned the Lavush last week also about the machlokas with the Ramah, about Tosefes before, Tosefes after. Says the Lavush in source number in Tavkuf Pei Beis. It's not in front of you. He says why? Because Rosh Hashanah, one of the reasons we blow shofar is zecher to the Tkiyah Gedolah that we're davening for. Tkah B'Shofar Gadol L'Chei Ruseinu is also connected to Geula and can also be a Geula Rechta. And finally says the Lavush, which is a halachic sefer. What about Yom Kippur? What about Kivayom Hazeh Yechaper Aleichem? Says the Lavush, unbelievable. Hu zichron ha'geula ha'amitis, hu geulas ha'nefesh. The ein l'cha geula richta gedola mizu. There's no greater geula than that. Wow, that sounds pretty hashkafic, pretty machshavadik, but the Levush is using it to explain the halacha. Another answer to answer all of these, the summary Shonim discuss this, and that is maybe we're just using those psukim to basically announce to people, remember to say the right Amida, remember to say the right Shemona Esrei. It's like the banking on the bima. So you could also announce. You can say Yalav Yavo. You can announce. So these psukim are like an announcement. So if you say that, you don't have to get into any of the beautiful lumdis that we just said. But either way, this is an expansion. The Torah only quotes Vishamru, but this is the minhag that's developed in many places in Klal Yisrael, as we just explained. Good. The Shulchan Aruch, getting back to the Hashkivenu change. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reis Samach Zayin in source number 14 tells us, right? Hashkivenu, you change the ending. But once you get to V'sel Kanafecha, we say Fros Aleinu Hapores. But what happens? Happens to the best of us if we forgot, and we ended Shomer Yisrael Ad, and we realize, we said the wrong one. So what do you do? So the Mishnah Berurah explains, if you remember right away, which often happens, right, when we remember right away, Vim Shachach V'Yamar, you just hope you didn't say it too loudly so nobody else heard you. Vim Shachach V'Yamar, Shomer Yisrael Ad, Tachas Hapori Sukkah Shalom. If you remember right away, Token the Dibur, so right then you say Hapori Sukkah Shalom, you say the Chasima. But in Shachach the Dibur, if it's ready a few seconds later, no, you're done. You don't have to repeat. You said the wrong one. It's a better chasima, but it's not a wrong chasima to say the weekday one, and therefore one is okay. One doesn't have to repeat. Good. Moving right along. Then we have the special Shemona Esrei that we have for Shabbos, which we'll talk about later, in a future shiur. And then right after that, we have Vayechulu, though. We have Vayechulu in Shemona Esrei. Vayechulu is the testimony, the psukim for Bereshis that testify that Hashem created the world. When we declare Vayechulu, we are declaring that Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. The Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yates even tells us in source number 16 that when a Jew says Vayechulu, he's partnering with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ma'alav alav hakasav ki'ilu nasa shutuf la'Kadosh Baruch Hu b'ma'aseh Bereshis. It's as if he is partnering with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Ma'aseh Bereshis. Why? Because a Jew when a Jew keeps Shabbos and declares Shabbos, he is adding. Rav Soloveitchik gave the mashal. I think I might have mentioned this, and we'll mention this again when we talk about Kiddush. But the Gemara says in the Darim that there's a concept of Bechor Behema Tahora, a Bechor of a kosher animal. Bechor of a kosher animal, that's Kedusha, automatic Kedusha. It's the only carbon that has automatic Kedusha, and that's why it's the only one that we have to worry about nowadays. We don't want karbanos walking around. So already in the days of Tosfos, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, the minhag was to sell a percentage of the ownership of the mother to a non-Jew, and that prevents the Kedusha of the offspring. Because if you don't do that, you have a Bechor that's born, that's trouble. You don't want a carbon walking around. So we try to prevent that. So it's an automatic Kedusha. But says the Gemara in Nedarim, even though there's automatic Kedusha of a Bechor, mitzvah lahakdisho. There's a mitzvah for the Jew to say, this is kadosh. This is sanctified. A Jew's own personal hakdasha adds something. So we add something when we testify, when we act. So that's the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yates. When we say Vayechulu, we're becoming a shut of a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Ma'aseh Bereshis. So we say the Shemona Esrei. So why do we repeat it again right afterwards? Right after Shemona Esrei, we say Vayechulu again. So the Rush says, in the end of Psachim, in Arvi Psachim, in Surah 17, that really Chazal instituted to say Vayechulu after the Amida only for a Yontif that falls out on Shabbos. Because then you don't say Vayechulu, you say the Yontif Shemona Esrei. You don't say Vayechulu, so you have to say Vayechulu again afterwards. But once we're going to say Vayechulu, in that unusual case, Chazal said to always say it. Unbelievable. Very unusual. Low plug, usually have a low plug, because it applies 90% of the time, you throw in the 10%. Here, it only applies in 2% of the time. But because it applies in 2%, we say it always. Fascinating. But that's what Chazal did, and that's what we do. We say Vayechulu afterwards. The Shulchan Aruch has another reason, a second reason why we would say Vayechulu, not only because of the case of a Yontif Shachal Yos B'Shabbos, but also, let's say somebody who's on a Baki. Somebody doesn't really know how to daven. So we want to be motzi them. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Reis Samach Zayin in source 18. Chozrim Lomar Vayechulu. Mishum Yontif Shachal Yos B'Shabbos. Shein Omer Oso V'Gam Lahotzi L'mi She'eni Yodeya. And also to be motzi someone who doesn't know. Good. Now we get to the next halacha of Vayechulu. V'Omer says the Shulchan Aruch. V'Omer Oso B'Kol Ram U'Ma'uma. Say it out loud and say it standing. Why? Because it's edus, testimony. Testimony you stand, and testimony you say out loud. So therefore, you have to say it in that way. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Taz. The Taz now he has this on Machlokes Achronim, but this is the minhag of Klal Yisrael based on this Taz. Says the Taz. Also, when you give edus, you have to give it in pairs. There's no such thing as one aid. And that's an exception. There are usually you need two witnesses. So says the Taz in source 19. And you have to say it. And then the Torah says, "V'omer moso yachad." That's not the Shulchan Aruch. Yachad. What does yachad mean? What does yachad mean? Says the Turei Zav. Says the Taz. I think it means you have to say it with at least two people. Nearly the yachad mispalal ein chozol vaychulu dein edus liyachid. If you only have one person, you don't say vaychulu again because you need edus, and edus requires two. And therefore, this is why the minhag developed that if somebody was long in their Shemona Esrei, they'll find somebody else to say vaychulu with after the Shemona Esrei. The mir yachal amar, the Taz says if a yachad wants to say it, he should not have kavanah that he's getting edus. But kikori batorah. Like he's reading Torah. Kain, near Lanias Daiti. That's the Chiddush of the Taz, and that has developed into the minhag of Klal Yisrael. Even though you think about it, and we'll see sources about this in a minute, this is not regular edus. The Machzas HaShekel, that's not on your sheet, but the Machzas HaShekel on the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch says, Edom never have to testify simultaneously. They don't say the word simultaneously. It's always one after another. So why would you need to say it at the same time? Vayachulu. No edus ever needs that. So the Machzas HaShekel says, well, this is edus that Hashem created the world, so it's different. Okay, but either way, you see it's not a regular edus. We'll see soon in the Chazon Ish, I think. It's nighttime. There's no edus b'layla. So it's a chiddush what the Taz says, but this has developed to be the minhag of Klal Yisrael. The Mishnah Berurah quotes this Taz v'al kol panim yiyu b'shnayim. At least you should have two. V'yachad is palal. If a yachad is saying it, either he should just skip it. Eino chozer l'amar vayachulu. He shouldn't repeat vayachulu. And if he does, he should say it without kavana for edus, as the Taz says. This is so important, according to some, that the Bir Halacha quotes the Pri Megadim that you should even hurry your private silent amida a little bit Friday night to be able to say it with the chazan. or with the tzibor. To do it with it's even more than two. Yemaher l'sayim tfilaso. Just try to say it a little faster. You do have a little flexibility before you finish. Shlomo Zalman says in Ma'or HaShabbos, in the next source, that if you got up to Elokai Nitzar, you could already say it then. You said Yilaratson, you're Elokai Nitzar, you could say Vaychul already with the tzibor at that moment. But you don't have to finish one esrei. But you see there's an importance to saying it with the tzibor. The Or Letzion, the Jewish Or Letzion, the Chazon Ish also says what? For this minhag that the Taz quotes, to be able to say it together, you should hurry your Shemona Esrei? No. Kavana, it's a din. Says the Or Letzion, no, it's not ma'akev. The Shulchan Aruch says to say it standing and to say it out loud. The Taz says, biyachad. I don't think you have to hurry your Shemona Esrei for that, says the Or Letzion in source 23. And he said the Iker Takana is only because you didn't have time. That's the Iker reason why we say it. And therefore, Bavada, Ein Sarakan Kol Dina Edus, Ein Edus Balayla, that's what he says. And therefore, Ein Lamaher Hatfila, don't daven quickly. You can daven like at your normal pace and don't worry about it. The Chazon Ish even argues on the Taz fundamentally in his understanding of the Tur. The Tur says, Yesh Omer Shenagol Omer B'Kol U'Me'umad. Fine, Kol Ram and Me'umad. What about Yachad together? Maybe that means when the whole Tzibor is saying it, because this is Eidos and Ma'aseh Bereshis. So the whole tzibor together, that's the covet. Rova Majus Melech. But two people, says the Chazon Ish, you don't need that. You don't need that, says the Chazon Ish in the end of source 24. Lo matzinu zeh b'poskim ve'ein lanu l'chadish dvarim. You don't do mechadesh. V'chein vayachulu shomer lakos v'nira dein lahader achar shnayim. Lo matzinu b'poskim. You don't find this in poskim. But the minhag of Klal Yisrael, and minhag shouldn't be taken lightly. The Piskei Teshuvos quotes because the Mishnah Berurah said it, because the Mishnah Berurah paskin like the Taz. This is the minhag of Klal Yisrael to say it with someone else, and that is what we generally try to do. So that is the vayachulu right after Shemona Esrei. And again, fascinating that it's a low plug based on the 2% of the time when we wouldn't say Tachnun, that when we wouldn't say it after Shemona Esrei on a Yom Tov Shechaliyos b'Shabbos. So we continue going. Friday night, right after vayachulu, we have bracha me'ein sheva. Bracha me'ein sheva, which is a shortened. It looks like a shortened Chazaras Hashatz. Maggid avos bidvaro. That's the second bracha. Mechayim Mesim. That's the first bracha and the second bracha of Shemona Esrei. Hamelach Hakadosh or Akel Hakadosh. Shein Kamohu. And then we have the Shabbos discussion. Right. So what are we doing there? So we never have a Chazaras Hashatz at night. That's a separate topic. The Rambam says Kos Tfilas Shabbos Rishus, but we don't have a Chazaras Hashatz at night. So why are we having a miniature Chazaras Hashatz? If there's no Machayev, if there's no halachic generator for having Chazaras Hashatz repetition on any night of the week, so why is Shabbos different? So the Gemara in Shabbos on Chav Daled in source number 26 says two words: Mishum Sakana, because of danger. What danger are we talking about here? What danger? So Rashi explains. Rashi says that's why we have this maggid avos. What exactly is the danger? So the Mefarshim explain. You have it in front of you from the Taz again, the two Reis of in source 28, because they used to daven out in the fields. That's where the shuls were. They were outside. And let's say somebody showed up late. Somebody was getting ready for Shabbos. You can understand. Somebody had a crazy Friday afternoon. They showed up late, so they're going to be davening while everybody else is finished ready, and they're going to leave. So we want to delay so that the latecomers could finish and we could all leave the field together. That is what the Taz says. That's the sakana. Nisnakana. Mishum sakanas mazikim. Shapatik Knesset Shalem Ayu Besados. It was in the fields. V'tiknol Sam Bishul Bnei Adam Shemachrin. It's amazing. A takana for latecomers. This should not encourage latecomers, but it's pikuach nefesh. Right? Lavol Beis Knesset. She signed with Tilasam V'Ocha Shliach Tzibur Marich Kedeisa Beperek Ba'Malikin. That's why we have this. This minhag, which is then quoted, it's not just a minhag, now it's in Shulchan Aruch, and it is a din. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says, biyachid, one doesn't say maggid avos. Somebody's davening by themselves. They don't say maggid avos, it's a tzibur takana. Shulchan Aruch says, 29, v'yomer shliach tzibur bracha achmin sheva, ve'ein ha'yachid omer osa. The yachid doesn't say it, the yachid wants to say it, no shem Hashem, no bracha. You can say nice phrases, but no bracha, no tefillah, you have to say it without the psicha and the chasima. But because, and many are familiar with this halacha, because it was created for not just the tzibur, but for a shul, it was because the shuls were out in the fields, so that's why the Rishonim say, it only is said where you have the tzura of a shul. But let's say you have a minyan where you usually don't have a minyan. You made a minyan one place. It's not a shul. Says the Rivash. Shuvas Rivash Siman Mem in source number 30. Ein Omer Moso Bebeis Chasanim or Beis Ha'avel. If you have a separate wedding minyan in a place where you usually don't have a minyan, or an Avelus minyan, no maggid avos. You go straight from Vayachulu to Kaddish. Vayachulu to Kaddish. Shemitchila Lo Niskan El Bebeis HaKnesses Sheyakol Bo and Sham. They all came there because of the mazikin, and that is why it is not said. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes that. The Shulchan Aruch says, Ein Omrim Bracha Mein Sheva Bebeis Chasanim VaAvelim. The like a time of the Machrin Lavok Shini Zokin. It's a shul in the field, but if you have a separate minyan, the whole reason was never instituted. They're never instituted there. The Mishnah Berurah adds on a detail. So we don't have Beis Chasanim today. We don't have Beis Avelim so much, but sometimes we have minyanim that are not so kavua. Not so kavua. So what makes a minyan kavua? What makes a minyan kavua for this halacha of when you say maggid avos? What if you have a Friday night minyan on the block every Friday night? Right? Is that good enough kavua? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Pirish 32, explaining the Shulchan Aruch. If you just daven in a house, Mishnah Berurah seems to say, no maggid avos. But if there's a kfiyas of a certain number of days, sefer Torah etzlam, a sefer Torah, come on, you read them. Sometimes in the marketplaces, they'll make minyanim there for a few weeks, maybe for a month. The marketplace will go on. They have a minyan there with a kfiyas with the sefer Torah. Then you say it. The Mishnah Berurah seems to say that you need the sefer Torah. The Igris Moshe Feinstein does not know what the Sefer Torah has to do with anything. Why does the Sefer Torah make it more kavua? Just parenthetically, it's also a mystery in Hilchos Avelos. People say that when you have 3 Torah readings, so then you can bring the Torah. There's not Very unclear what the source for that is. You should have Kavanat Torah, and you should have an Aron there, which could give a kvias, but that's not for now. But the Rav Moshe says, no, it doesn't. What does the Sefer Torah do with it? It means if you have a kvias of a minion there. Rav Moshe says if you daven there every Friday night, that's a kvias of a minion. That's a kvias of a minion, and therefore you can say maggid avos. Ubeis hakneses kavua l'tfilas ma'ariv b'Shabbos. Just Friday night, right? Some people live far from the shul, they want to have a minion there. V'yaf malkum kavua b'bayis echad, so rachlam bracha min sheva. Interesting. Rav Moshe says bayis echad. What if you have a rotating minion on a block, and every week it's in a different house? I'm not sure, because that's a kavua minion, but not a kavua spot. So one should ask their local Orthodox rabbi. He'll probably say, don't have house minyanim, just come to the shul. So I don't know if people might want to, a little dangerous, have to call up a different shul's rabbi to ask that question. But either way, Rav Moshe says if it's in his house, in the same house with a minyan kavua, you would say it. And Rav Moshe says, "Vatzliya b'sefer Torah lo move on." I don't know what the Mishnah Berurah's tliya is with a sefer Torah. The Piskei Teshuvos quotes that the minhag in Yerushalayim is to always say it, because of the elevated status and the kedusha of Yerushalayim. So the minhag is, he says, Lomer Mein Sheva Afilu b'minyan she'eino kavua ve'ein sham sefer Torah. Some say there is a minyan kavua, so the minhag of Yerushalayim are different. Rav Shlomo Zalman says maybe whatever the special minhag of Yerushalayim is only applies in the old city. Ben Achomos, Rav Shlomo Zalman says, even if you want to say this flexibility, maybe it doesn't mean modern Yerushalayim, but it means old Yerushalayim. Old Yerushalayim. Rav Avadia also talks about this in the Yalkut Yosef. In source 36, only where there's a shul. Right, that was the language of the Rivash. If you're davening in a house of a shiva or a wedding where there's not normally a minyan, in Yerushalayim, where the kedusha is more serious, and he also says, Rak Yerushalayim ha'atika. The Ben Ish Chai is not a fan of ever limiting this. The Ben Ish Chai, again, a great Sephardi posek, and also Mordechai Elio says we say bracha mein sheva always, even though the Gemara talks about just mishum sakana, but al pi Kabbalah they say there's a lot of sodos in the bracha mein sheva, and therefore one always says it, even in a place, even against the Rishonim, right? In Yerushalayim, gam bebeis chasanim, bebeis avelim, no sefer Torah, we still say it. What about summer minyanim? So the minhag is to say it. If there's a kavua summer minyan, let's say people go away for the summer, and for 8 weeks or 10 weeks there's a minyan there always. There's no minyan there for 10 months. The minhag is to say it. That's a kavua minyan for these times, and therefore one would say it. Shilas came up during Corona where the whole tzibur was davening outside. So Poskim said that's considered the minyan move, but that's the whole minyan. But there are others, the quotes here on page 212, there Rabbi Willig, Paskin, that a consistent minyan held right outside the sanctuary, but close to the shul is enough also. So one has to know certain shilas about kfiyas should be asked if one is not clear. So this is all Friday night. We spoke about Mincha, we spoke about Kabbalah Shabbos, we spoke about Ma'ariv, the Chasima, we spoke about the Psukim in between, we spoke about Vayachulu, we spoke about Maggid Avos. So now we get to Shabbos morning. We get to Shabbos morning, and we have Shachris. So what do we have for Shachris? So even before we get to davening, there's an interesting discussion. We know that there's generally an isser of eating before davening. The Gemara Brachas Daf Yud, based on the pasuk of Lo Sochlu Al Adam, Lo Tochlu Lefnei Shatem Ispalim Al Dimchem, one is not allowed to eat before davening, for yourself. So in an earlier Tzurba packet, in booklets, in one of the earlier volumes where earlier Arachaim Sugis were discussed about eating before davening, and we were mako in terms of having a drink and having coffee if it's going to help you in terms of your davening, or a little, whatever the poskim allow there. Not getting back into that. But whatever is allowed, something is allowed according to most. Water, coffee. What about Shabbos? Maybe Shabbos is different. What do you mean? Shabbos is a day that we said before, Onik Shabbos and Neshama Yisera. Maybe Shabbos is more chamor. Why? Because there's a chiyuv of Kiddush. And we'll learn, you're not allowed to eat before Kiddush. You're not even allowed to have a drink of water before Kiddush. So Shabbos morning, maybe it's more chamor. Not only do I have the halacha of not eating before davening, I have the halacha of not eating before Kiddush. So what do? So the poskim explain, based on the earlier sources, not a problem. Because the chiyuv of Kiddush only kicks in after Shachris. Before Shachris, it's like a regular day, basically, in terms of the eating before davening. And that's what the Beis Yosef quotes in Siman Peites, quoting from the Tashbei Zachrani, Sharisi Kazav B'Sefer Echad, Shemati Lishos Afilu B'Shabbos V'Yantif. You're allowed to eat or drink before davening. V'lo mitzvah b'bnei shelo kiddush. There's no isser because of a lack of kiddush mishum. To come shalosh his palel, if you didn't daven yet, Shachris, Hakati lo mati zman kiddush. The zman kiddush has not kicked in yet, and that is what the Shulchan Aruch says as well in Reish Peites. Shulchan Aruch says, the lishos mayim baboker kotem tefila mutter. You can drink water. Mipnei shelo adayin lo chal lachovas kiddush. The chiyuv of kiddush didn't kick in yet. What about women? So if a woman, what's the question? Because let's say a woman generally is busy with her kids, she's not going to daven. That's a different shiur about what a woman has to daven. She's busy with her kids, she's not going to daven. She davens a little bit. So what happens if she davens a little bit before her kids get up? She davens whatever she davened already. Does her chiyuv of kiddush kick in now? Says the Isha Yisrael in source number 40 on page 214. Isha Shregilos Palatam Tefillah Shachris. If a woman generally davens Shachris, Afilu Mistapekas B'Tefillah Ketzara, a shorter Tefillah, Mutter Lo Lishtos Lefnei Tefillah. Rakas Adramshis Barolea, like we said, before she davens, it's not a problem because there's no chiyuv of kiddush yet. But what happens after she davens? That's her davening. So does she have a chiyuv of kiddush now? Now it's 8 o'clock in the morning, so I daven my tefillah, and I'm going to take care of the kids. I have to make kiddush before I drink something. Say the Isha Yisrael, it could be. But that is not the minhag of many, for various reasons. Number one, the Isha Yisrael says, if somebody doesn't make kiddush and they wait till later, There is a tshuva of Rav Moshe. I'm not sure if it's going to come up later in the book. Rav Moshe finds it as a tshuva that says because a woman is mishubedes to eat with her husband, because her husband's chiyuv of kiddush didn't kick in yet, so her chiyuv of kiddush didn't kick in yet either, and then she could eat without kiddush. Unbelievable kiddush. But maybe we'll talk about that at a later date. But this is the minhag of many is not to. But if a woman did her davening, if she's going to go to shul and daven, then for sure she's allowed to drink and have coffee beforehand. But if she already did her davening that she's going to do, that's where the shiloh comes up, and that's a machlokes haposkim. If one is eating for health purposes, so then also you can eat before davening. What if you have to eat? What if somebody has to eat a big meal? You have to eat a big bowl of cereal, and so you have to make kiddush there. You have to make kiddush when it's more of a serious eating. That's the question the Or Letzion was asked. What does he say? No. Ain't tzarach lekadesh. Doesn't make a difference. But many others say no. This is different. If you look in the Bir Halacha and Rav Moshe, you have Rav Moshe in front of you, but it's also the Bir Halacha and Rav Vadia say if you're going to eat a full meal, and even not a full meal, but we're going to eat pasta babakistan and things that could be a full meal if you ate enough of it, Rav Moshe says then you need to make kiddush. Then you need to make kiddush. Even in nothing with davening. But there's a chiyuv of kiddush after shachris. But if you already now have a heter achila because of the refuah purposes, so then the chiyuv of kiddush kicks in even without davening. And that's what Rav Moshe says. Kiddush b'cholah shetzorach lechol kodem shachris nira lani yisaydi lachriya. The tzorach lechol pasif you have to have bread or you have to have something that's similar to bread. Ashu rak pasta babakistan sheish lo din pas b'kfiyah suda tzorach lekadesh. Then you have to be mekadesh like the Mishnah Berurah says. But if you just have mizodas mevushalim, things that will never become bread, so then you can get by without kiddush. That's Rav Moshe's chiluk. Okay, beautiful. So that's in terms of eating before. So now we get to the actual davening. Let's talk for a moment about the beginning, not the Shemona Esrei, we have a Psukei de Zimra. So we know we have an extended Psukei de Zimra on Shabbos. The Torah writes, because nobody's going to work. So you have more time to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right, the Torah says, V'omrim, source number 44, V'omrim Baruch Sha'amar Psukei de Zimra v'noagin l'hosem mizmorim, l'fi she'ein bo bitul malach la'am. Meaning, what does that sound like? We should always be saying more praise to Hashem. Psukei de Zimra. Praise to Hashem, but we understand that on a weekday we have to go to work and we can't spend so much time in shul. Chazal knew that, but on Shabbos we have more time. So we say more. We say more. What happens if sometimes it happens? You have your sitter and you just go straight and and the person forgets and they say the whole weekday Psukei de Zimra. Right, and like, oh, I forgot to turn the page. Sometimes we remember in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, we see somebody else and we help them and we move their sitter for them. So what happens there if you said the whole weekday Psukei de Zimra? It says the Piskei Teshuvos in the name of other Achronim. But so as long as you didn't start Berachas Kriya Shema yet, you can add it in right there. Even right after Yishtabach, even though Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach are really the opening and closing of Psukei de Zimra, you can add it in right there. As long as you didn't start Berachas Kriya Shema yet. Again, after davening you can say whatever you want in terms of Tehillim. But if you want to get it to be counted as Psukei de Zimra, you can say it right there after Yishtabach. Sometimes we remember like, oi, say it right there. And you don't even have to go in order, he says. Means our last below our last seder. But if you look for Amar Yishtabach, even if you already said Yishtabach, you could say it right there. Say it right there. Avon for his shots, the shots already started Kaddish. Kaddish is ready. The Mitzari is getting ready for the Birchas Kriya Shema. So then he says I wouldn't add it in right then. What about Nishmas? How important is Nishmas? So the Nishmas is in the Gemara. Sachem Kuf Yirches. The Gemara mentions that Nishmas is Birchas Hashir, something that we say at the end of the Seder. Why is it called Birchas Hashir? Tosfos there says in Sachem Kuf Yirches 47 because we say it as part of the Shir of Psukei de Zimra on Shabbos and Yantif. That's what Tosfos says. The Korah Nishmas Kol Chai Birchas Hashir Lefi Shabbos Shabbosos Omer Moso Achim Psukei de Zimra, and therefore that's why it's called Birchas Hashir. But it is very crucial. Nishmas is more important maybe than the rest of the additions that we make. Maybe not more important than the regular, so to speak, the weekday Psukei de Zimra, but maybe based on the additions. Where do you see that? The Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Chai Adam. Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Chai Adam. What happens if somebody is running late? So you can skip the extra ones. What about if you're really running late? So do you skip Nishmas or do you skip? What do you skip? Says the Chayadam. The B'Shabbos b'Chuyev Lamer Nishmas. You have to say Nishmas. So Mutav She'yadalik Mizmorim. Skip all the other additions besides Nishmas. The main lo shows klal. If you're running at bare bones, right? We know weekday. Baruch Shamar Ashrei Yishtabach. Shabbos. Baruch Shamar Ashrei Nishmas Yishtabach. Says the Chayadam, Nishmas is in there. Nishmas is crucial for the Psukei de Zimra that we have. The Rav Ovadia, the Chazon Ovadia, is not so convinced. He thinks that it's better to Mishin Zachar B'Shabbos Lovov B'Shabbos Beis HaKnesses. You have to skip some. It says Adif L'Dalik Nishmas She'ein Ola Minhag. Nishmas is a minhag. V'o Tadev She'ein Tadir Tadir Kodem. Psukei de Zimra Tadir Yoser. Meaning, Rav Ovadia says all the other Halalukas, for example, come before Nishmas. All the weekday Psukei de Zimra comes before Nishmas. Nishmas comes before the other Hosafos, like Yoshi B'Seis Elyon and the other, but it does not come before the other Lukas. So it's a machlokas. The Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chai Adam that Nishmas comes before. It comes right after Baruch Shamar Ashrei Yishtabach. It comes with that set, and the Chazon Ovadia says no. The other Psukei de Zimra comes first. What if you didn't say it? Do you have to is it not Shabbos for you? If you didn't say any of the additions, so the Ramah says no. The only thing that if you don't say you weren't Yossi, you got to go back is in the Birchas Kriya Shema L'Kel Asher Shabbos, because that paragraph talks actually about Shabbos. That's exactly about Shabbos. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says in 52. L'Kel Asher Shabbos. That one paragraph which talks about Shabbos, Machzirin also, you have to say that again. Says the Ramah. The Mishnah Berurah says, what does that mean? Doesn't mean you have to say the whole bracha again. Ein HaKavanah in the Mishnah Berurah in Reish Pe'ala 51. Shemachzirin also l'Berachas Yotzer Ar El Achar Tfilas Yulches Yom HaKach B'li Bracha. After you finish one Esrei, you say it. You say it without the bracha. And the Chai Adam again says, Shalei Dali Chachila Nusach L'Kel Asher Shabbos. Try not to skip it because it's based on the Zohar. Try to say it in order in this regard. So usually it's not so common that somebody would skip L'Kel Asher Shabbos. Psukei de Zimra comes up sometimes if somebody's not focused. But L'Kel Asher Shabbos, right? Berachas Kriya Shema goes straight, and in that way fulfill what the Torah says. We have extra time on Shabbos, so we praise Hashem more. We should all remember and take advantage of every moment of Shabbos, of Torah, of Tefillah, and enjoying ourselves, because that's what Shabbos is about. Have an amazing, amazing week, and B'Hashem, we continue next time with shiur number 6 and the second half of Tefillah of Shabbos.